Thomas Chen stood in his San Francisco tech company's testing lab at 2 in the morning, staring at the device that was supposed to change everything. His 6-year-old daughter Emma was asleep 3 floors above in the small apartment he kept adjacent to his office. He had not tucked her in tonight. Again, the prototype medication dispenser for Alzheimer patients sat mockingly on the metal table, displaying the same error message it had shown for 3 months. His team of 20 brilliant engineers had tried every solution imaginable, but the locking mechanism kept jamming at random intervals. In 4 weeks they were supposed to present this device to investors, who had already committed $40 million, based on his promise that this technology would help families like his own, who had watched loved ones struggle with memory loss. Thomas had built Meditech solutions from nothing after watching his mother forget to take her heart medication 3 times in 1 week. The terror in her eyes, when she could not remember whether she had taken her pills that morning, had broken something inside him. 6 months later, she had passed away from complications that might have been prevented. He had promised himself then that no other family would suffer the same way. But now, with the deadline approaching and his daughter growing more distant every day, he was beginning to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake, thinking he could balance being a single father and a CEO. Emma had lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. Thomas had thrown himself into his work partly to honor his wife's memory and partly to escape the suffocating grief. Sarah had always believed in his vision for Meditech. She had encouraged him to take the risk, to help people who struggled with medication management. But she had also made him promise that Emma would always come first. Lately he was failing at that promise too. The apartment door opened and Rosa Martinez walked in carrying a cup of tea. She had been Emma's nanny for 18 months and had become an unexpected anchor in their chaotic lives. Rosa was in her early 50s with kind eyes and a quiet strength that reminded Thomas of his mother. She placed the tea beside him without a word and started to leave, but something made her pause. "What's wrong with it?" she asked, gesturing toward the device. Thomas laughed bitterly. "If I knew that I wouldn't be here at 2 in the morning." Rosa stepped closer, examining the dispenser with genuine curiosity. She had watched Thomas work himself to exhaustion over this project. She had also watched Emma learn to fall asleep without her father's goodnight kiss. "May I try something?" Rosa asked. Thomas nodded absently, expecting her to press a few buttons and give up like everyone else. Instead, Rosa picked up the device and turned it completely upside down. She gave it a gentle shake and Thomas heard something small and metallic rattling inside. She set it down right side up and pressed the release button. The locking mechanism opened smoothly without any resistance. Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "How did you know to do that?" Rosa smiled softly. "When my grandmother had arthritis, she used to keep her pill organizer upside down because her swollen fingers could open it easier that way. I noticed your device locks the same way. Sometimes a small piece of the mechanism gets turned around during assembly. My husband used to build medical equipment before he passed. He taught me that the simplest solution is often the right one." Thomas quickly called his lead engineer, who arrived within 20 minutes. They disassembled the device and discovered that Rosa was exactly right. A tiny spring inside the locking mechanism had been installed backwards, causing it to bind under certain conditions. It was such a simple error that 20 engineers with advanced degrees had overlooked it completely. They had been searching for complex software bugs and sophisticated mechanical failures, when the answer was literally just turning the problem on its head. Within 3 days, the entire production line had been corrected. The devices functioned perfectly. The presentation to investors was not just successful, it was transformative. They increased their commitment to $60 million in orders, started flowing in from hospitals across the country. Meditech was about to become everything Thomas had dreamed of. But something else happened that night in the lab that mattered even more. When Rosa had turned to leave after solving the problem, Thomas had asked her to wait. He looked at this woman who had cared for his daughter with such dedication, who had somehow seen a solution that had eluded his entire team. He realized with sudden clarity that he had been so focused on building something to help strangers that he had been blind to what was right in front of him. "Emma needs you," he said quietly, "but I think maybe I need you too. Not just as a nanny. Rosa, I've been so caught up in trying to honor Sarah's memory through this company that I forgot the other promise I made her. Emma should always come first." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. She had watched this brilliant broken man struggle alone for so long. She had seen him miss Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences. She had held Emma while the little girl cried, asking why her daddy didn't have time for her anymore. The next morning, Thomas called an emergency board meeting. He announced that he was restructuring his role at Meditech. He would remain CEO, but he was promoting his chief operating officer to handle daily operations. He was also creating a new position, director of family wellness and innovation. He offered this position to Rosa with a salary triple what he had been paying her as a nanny. Her job would be to review all their products from the perspective of the actual families who would use them. She would also ensure that Meditech maintained policies that allowed employees to prioritize their families without sacrificing their careers. Rosa accepted with one condition. Thomas had to leave the office every day by 5 o'clock to have dinner with Emma. He had to attend every school event. He had to remember that the best way to honor his wife's memory was not through building a successful company, but through being the father Emma deserved. Thomas agreed, and he kept that promise. Over the next year, Meditech grew beyond his wildest expectations. But more importantly, Emma started smiling again. She stopped asking her teachers if her daddy still loved her. She began showing Rosa her drawings and telling Thomas about her days at school. The three of them became a family, not in the traditional sense, but in the way that matters most, through choice and love and commitment. Rosa's insights transformed Meditech's approach to product development. She caught design flaws that engineers missed because she understood how real families actually lived. The medication dispenser became the most successful assistive device in its category, specifically because Rosa had insisted on features that made it accessible to people with arthritis, limited vision, and cognitive challenges. She had not just solved one problem that night, she had shown Thomas an entirely different way of seeing. 2 years after that morning in the lab, Thomas stood on a stage accepting an award for innovation in healthcare technology. But instead of giving the standard speech about disruption and market penetration, he told the story of a nanny who had saved his company by turning a problem upside down. He talked about how 20 engineers with impressive credentials had failed where one woman with life experience and compassion had succeeded. He announced that Meditech was endowing a scholarship program for non-traditional students, people like Rosa who had wisdom to offer, but had never had access to formal education in their fields. Emma sat in the front row between Rosa and Thomas's sister, beaming with pride. After the ceremony, she ran to her father and hugged him tight. "You remembered to come," she whispered. Thomas lifted her up, even though she was getting big for that now. "I'll always remember now, sweetheart. Rosa taught me that the most important things are the ones right in front of us." The story of the nanny who solved the impossible problem spread through Silicon Valley and beyond. It became a reminder that intelligence comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones with the clearest vision. Thomas learned that success means nothing if you lose yourself and the people you love along the way. He learned that true innovation isn't just about technology, it's about seeing people for who they really are and valuing every contribution, no matter where it comes from. Rosa never forgot that she was a nanny first and that Emma would always be her priority. But she proved that caring for children and changing an industry were not mutually exclusive. She showed that kindness is not soft or simple, but rather the hardest and most valuable quality any of us can possess. If this story touched your heart, we hope you'll take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that their contributions matter, no matter what their title might be. The world changes not just through grand gestures, but through small acts of wisdom and compassion from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person who can solve your impossible problem is already in your life, quietly making everything better. You just have to have the humility to see them and the wisdom to listen.